and give you the most time possible to review, so I'm not gonna go like crazy, like long on this unless you need me to. So I'm thinking, what if I like give you the answers and then if I need to explain it further? Does that work? All right, so the domain for the first one, domain comes from vertical asymptotes and holes. So I see that I have both. The vertical asymptote is 2 and the hole is -2. -2 comes first. So I have 2 restrictions, so I'm gonna have 3 intervals. It's just a matter of which of those restrictions comes first. -2 comes before +2, so I put them in that order. So that's my domain. My range comes from my hole and my horizontal asymptote. So my hole is -1.5 and my horizontal asymptote is 0. -1.5 comes before 0, so I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do -1.5 first. Domain and range. Anybody have questions on that? All right, we've got all this stuff, so we're just looking at increasing, decreasing. If I'm starting here, decreasing. If I'm starting here, decreasing. All of these intervals are decreasing. I'm going to use the intervals of the domain, and I'm going to put them in decreasing, all of them. I do have to take into account that if there's a brief stop at that hole, so I do have to use all 3 of these intervals. I'm using the y values instead of the x values. And then there would be an NA here. Each interval in the domain is a decreasing interval because these lines are going down. Anybody have questions on that? All the other stuff is all the stuff we've been doing so far. You'll have plenty of time to practice that today, but I feel like we've talked about it enough. We haven't talked a crazy amount about the range and the increasing, decreasing. So my domain comes from vertical asymptotes and holes. There's no hole, so I'm just going to go vertical asymptotes. Vertical asymptote is 2. -infinity to 2, 2 to infinity. This graph's only split up into 2 regions side by side. Now range, bottom to top, comes from min-max, it comes from hole, it comes from horizontal asymptote. I don't have any of those, right? There's no horizontal asymptote, there's a slant. There's no hole, I don't see an open circle, and I don't see a U shape. So if I don't have any of those things, my range is -infinity to +infinity. Looking at the 2 separate blue graphs here, I'd say they're both increasing. Like if I start from the left end and work my way to the right end, and from the left end and work my way to the right end, they're both increasing intervals. So I'll put my domain intervals in the increasing spot. There aren't any decreasing spots of this graph, so I'll just put NA. Questions on that graph? Domain, range, increasing behavior. All right. We've got this graph now. My domain comes from my vertical asymptote. It comes from holes. I don't have either of those things. So I'm taking breaks at -1 and +1. We okay with that? And then range is bottom to top. I'm looking for U shapes. I'm looking for horizontal asymptotes. I'm looking for holes. I do have a horizontal asymptote here, but the graph goes through it. Normally that doesn't happen, and so I'll stop at the horizontal asymptote. But because the graph goes through it, this is -infinity to +infinity. Normally we do -infinity to 2, 2 to infinity. This is my husband with my Starbucks. Hold on. He called me and said he'd bring it, and I mean, I'm not going to say no. Go to Starbucks. Yeah. Thank you. Bye. That's so sweet. It is. He doesn't do that often. All right, so normally we would go negative infinity to 2, 2 to infinity, but because it goes right through 2, it's negative infinity to infinity. In terms of my intervals, if I'm reading this left to right, they're all decreasing. They're all going down. So I'm going to put all my domain intervals in the decreasing spot. So you're using the domain intervals when you're describing this. Anybody have questions on those three parts of that graph? All right, and I think the next two are the two that I did on the ed puzzle yesterday, and I apologize for that was so boring, but I just didn't know how else to teach it to you if I wasn't here. So, domain of this, vertical asymptotes, holes. There's no holes, you don't see any open gaps. There's two vertical asymptotes. You can see them here. So which one comes first is the -1/2. Now, in terms of the range, I'm looking at horizontal asymptotes, mins and maxes, and holes, right? There is a minimum here. That point is happening right on the grid, so you didn't need to type anything into your calculator. This point right here is at 0, 9. It looks like it's right below 10. So we're going to call that a min at 0, 9. And it's a local min because there's graph below it. So I would circle the word local. So in terms of my range, it's negative infinity to the horizontal asymptote. That's that first line that's happening here. And that's 25 fourths. So negative infinity to 25 fourths. And then there's this break in the middle where nothing's happening. And then it picks up again right here. And that y value is 9. And since it's a point, we would use a bracket. So it would be 9 to infinity. So from the bottom top, it's negative infinity. This point is 25 fourths. It's an asymptote, so we use a parenthesis. And then 9 to infinity. 9 is a point, so we use a bracket. Because there's a min or a max, that makes the increasing, decreasing a little trickier. It's going to be more than just the domain intervals. We're going to have to split up one of those domain intervals, the middle one, because I've got on this one interval increasing and decreasing. So split that one up. The first interval, negative infinity to -1/2, is a decrease. The second interval is -1/2 to +1/2, but we're going to split that in half. The first half of it is decreasing to 0. And then the second half of it is increasing to the other half of the interval, which is the 1/2. So I'm splitting this. The 0 is in the middle. One part's increasing, one part's decreasing. And then the last interval, which is the 1/2 to infinity, is the increasing interval. We okay with that? Normally we just use the domain, but I can't do -1/2 to 1/2 in increasing or decreasing because it's both. And was there one more? Yeah. So for this one, domain, vertical asymptote, hole, there aren't any of them. So negative infinity to positive infinity. For range, I need to use horizontal asymptote, which we have one of those, and I need to use min and max. We have one of those too. This is a max, and it looks like it's at 0, 4. It is the highest point on the graph, so it's absolute rather than local, so I would circle absolute. So for my range, I'm starting here at the horizontal asymptote. There's no negative infinity because there's no graph down here. So the horizontal asymptote is -1, and I'm going to the peak of the graph, which is 4. Asymptotes are parentheses, mins and maxes are brackets. And then even though I have negative infinity to positive infinity as my domain, I'm going to have to split that because the graph isn't always increasing or always decreasing. So the first half of the graph is increasing until the middle of the graph, which is 0. And then the second half of the graph is decreasing. Questions? Do we feel okay with that? All right, so your review for today is just really a bunch of practice problems. I think that all the blanks are there, like they're not filled out for you, just to practice all the steps. I've got the steps on the board over here. They will be erased tomorrow. Like I'm not just gonna leave them on the, but for now, like you have that to practice. The test review guide is 25 to 28 in the workbook. The answer keys are up here. They're also on Canvas if you don't feel like getting up. If you wanted even more practice, I know some of you have come to see me like bonus blocks and stuff and wanted additional practice. We only did one problem of each for that warm up, but there were 2 problems per page on those. So there's 5 more problems on 20 through 24. That key's on Canvas too. We okay? All right. You guys have the rest of the class. Feel free to ask questions if you want or review as needed. Test tomorrow. We will just start right away just to make sure you have the whole period to work through that. What's up?
I was like out.